Welcome to McGarry's House Fightcast, episode 1.
Keep on going. Your source for MMA news from an outsider's perspective. I'm Jason.
I'm Ryan.
Let's just jump right into it. This has been a crazy week of fights, right? Or, to be more specific, non-fights. Looks like we're sort of, just to catch everyone up, in case you're watching this in the future, we are, 3 weeks into April. UFC 249, which was scheduled for this weekend, has been canceled.
Yes, crazy. It was off, and then it was on, and then it was off, and then it was on. I've never seen anything like this in sports. Well, first of all, we've never been in a pandemic like
Right.
we are now, where everything's shut down, and
Right.
MMA, UFC was our only shot of being connected through sports, and we're so close to getting it, and then it
Yeah.
got pulled right out from underneath of us.
It was really bizarre, actually, how everything went down. I think the interesting thing to me, one of the most interesting takeaways was, for those that are uninformed, this is like the 5th time that Khabib and Ferguson were supposed to fight. All the previous attempts were due to unforeseen circumstances, whether it's Ferguson tripping over some wire backstage or weight cut issues or someone getting injured. So it's been dubbed the curse card.
Yeah, the cursed fight. This is the 5th time that they were scheduled to fight. I think, like you said, a couple of times it was due to injuries. A couple of times it was due to someone not making weight. But to the hardcore MMA fans, Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson are the 2 top guys at the lightweight division. You got Khabib, who's undefeated. I believe he's 29-0, and the undisputed lightweight champion. It's impossible. It's really almost impossible to be undefeated in MMA at the UFC level to be a champion, and Khabib is up there.
Especially in that weight class, where the entire weight class is just stacked with killers, right?
Yeah, and Khabib is such a monster to be able to rise above that and be so dominant with everyone else. Then on the other side of the coin, you got Tony Ferguson, who hasn't been defeated in over 10 of his last UFC fights. He's been destroying everyone. There's a picture online of Tony Ferguson's last 7 opponents, and they look like they just got hit by a truck. So it was a perfect style of an unstoppable train meeting an immovable object.
Right. And then the crazier part is that leading up to this, people were speculating that there might be a chance that this fight might not even get hosted, right? Because everything that's going on in the world today with the whole coronavirus. And so Khabib makes a decision to fly back home to, I don't know if he went to Russia or if he went back home to, where's he from again?
So he's from Dagestan. His training camp was in San Jose, California. He flew to the Middle East a few weeks before the fight scheduled. So now he's getting a lot of flack for that at the time.
Fairly or unfairly so?
I think it's unfair. I mean, I always choose the fighter's perspective over the media or the promoter's perspective. What Khabib was trying to say was that the UFC says 99% chance that the fight is going to be in Abu Dhabi.
Right.
So Khabib flew to Abu Dhabi to get ready. When he gets there, he's turned away at the gate. They're not accepting anyone into the country. Then he goes to Russia, waiting for word. We don't hear anything. And then, meanwhile, he's getting a lot of backlash from fans for leaving the country.
Right. No, I 100% agree with you. Like, what incentive, if we think about incentives, like, what incentive does Khabib have for just not showing up to this fight, you know? He clearly needs to, this fight's going to happen regardless, right? Like, I don't understand why he would try to be dodging this particular fight. I do, and I forgot who I heard this from, but I do believe that maybe in a time like this, like he's at a disadvantage from Ferguson. Khabib seems like more coming from, and this is just pure speculation, but he has more of that Eastern European upbringing where everything's very regimented. He needs to have his full camp. Things are set on a specific schedule. And Tony Ferguson is the complete opposite of that, right? Where he's just a wild child. He does things his way. He's flexible. He's loose. He's the type of guy that's like, you on a drop of a dime, if you need him to fight, he's there. He's ready, right?
Yeah, so you do bring up a good point. There's two different personality traits and their vision of success. Khabib, on one hand, like I said, very regimented. He needs to predict what's going to happen in his life, and he plans everything out accordingly. Whereas Tony is just so crazy that if the fight was on the moon tomorrow, he'd make it.
Right.
So do you think in that case, with Khabib flying, making those plans, it'll like flying overseas and last minute changes, do you think that would have set him up to fail?
I don't know. And I feel like that's not even like the great question to ask, because at the end of the day, who cares? Like the fight didn't happen. It's going to happen. We should go into what happened on the aftermath once they found out that he couldn't leave his country. They had to do last minute changes. This is just a week ago. This is literally like 5-6 days ago, where Justin Gaethje was replaced Khabib, right? And that was just a whole another crazy side track of a deal, before we delve into that, I think in a sense we kind of dodged a bullet because everyone wanted to see Khabib Ferguson anyways, so that's gonna happen now.
I hope they preserve that fight.
I think that it was initially placed on hold. Khabib or Ferguson deserves that shot, right?
Well, going back to Khabib for a second, like he did everything right in my book. The way he went about talking about it with MMA media, he could have done a better job because he was kind of confusing us. If he would just been upfront in the beginning, like, this is what happened. But now he's saying, I'll fight you, just give me location, blah, blah. But so it made him look bad, but I've never looked at him as a bad guy. I totally was like on his side the entire time. And then, so anyways, while all that's happening, we hear in the MMA circles that Justin Gaethje, the number one contender, is going to be a replacement fighter.
Right.
So, which to me, it's not ideal, but I would still take that
I got sold
fight.
on the car. I'm not going to lie. Initially, I had my reservations. I did my homework, and then I got excited. But that's part of like the magic of the UFC hype machine. Is that there's enough content, there's enough storylines that you could latch onto. And there's enough people saying that this guy is just like a legit threat to anybody. I've even heard that he probably has one of the best shots against Khabib, just his style. So, it's interesting to see. Like any fight that they threw out there, I'm pretty sure I would have fucking paid for it because there's nothing else that's on right now, right?
Yeah, and like Justin Gaethje is such an action fighter too that whatever fight he's in, it's always entertaining. And I was still down to watch it. I know some people were like against it because the MMA purist wants to preserve the fight between Khabib and Tony, but I'm like, dude, at this point, no sports are going on. The UFC is trying to make it happen.
Right.
These guys are down to do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And then we find out through Ariel Helvani that the fight is not going through with Khabib and Tony. So, do you want to talk about how Ariel Helvani, the fake MMA reporter,
gamed the system and just potentially was a chink in the armor for UFC 249? Yeah, I think that was even more bizarre. Is like all this attention is being swirled around what's going on with the sport of UFC. All the other sports are closing down, and somehow Dana White able to pull off some magic again and throw this fight where he's not disclosing the location, and there's still like a shroud of mystery around this fight. Reporters are asking him, and I think it was last Thursday or last Wednesday where a fake Twitter account of the famous Ariel Helwani, titled Ariel Helvani.
Same avatar, same hand, same picture.
Clearly a ruse, right? Like he was supposed to he was just having shits and giggles, I'm guessing. But this individual somehow got Dana White to show his hand, and he tweeted out, "Hey, the fight." What did he say? What was his specific?
I think it was something along the lines of like breaking in all capital letters. UFC 249 is going ahead with Khabib versus Tony Ferguson, April 18th. The fight is on, folks.
Yeah.
And somehow that tweet took on a lot of steam. There were like it was circulating. A lot of people were liking it, retweeting it. So much so that the president of the UFC had to reply to the fake Ariel Helwani and say, this is not true. The fight is going on, but Khabib is not going to be on the card. It's going to be Tony versus
But his
Justin
tone
Gaethje.
was like upset. Like he was like, "This is lies." Like he basically was like, "What?" And they have a history of not getting along, obviously.
And you know Dana White hates Ariel Helwani.
Yeah,
so
with a passion. Yeah.
What do you think happened after he said that tweet? Do you think he called him up?
No way. No, they don't. I don't feel like they have that kind of relationship where he's gonna reach out to him.
Do you think he's like texting Ariel's ESPN bosses?
No, he was so livid that he didn't even like check to see if there's a verified Twitter mark on there, and just shot off his own tweet. You know, like he took the bait. It made him look foolish. And then the best part of it was that Ariel, the fake Twitter account, was like, he just left one more comment, or she, we don't know. It said, "I love you, Dana," something like that.
I can imagine the real Dana seeing the follow-up tweet saying, "I love you, Dana,"
and just being like, that's
Just
the moment that he
more livid.
realized. Yeah.
But you know what I was thinking about? The shady thing from Dana White's perspective is that when he replied to fake Ariel Helwani,
Yeah.
he says, "This is not true. The fight's going on." But, and then he tagged Khabib, but Khabib is off the card. It's moving forward with Tony and
he's, like,
Gaethje.
throwing him
So
under the
it's
bus
likely he's
kinda?
throwing him under the bus.
Yeah, maybe.
So anyways, that's going on.
Yeah.
And then we suddenly get this information that was not supposed to be officially disclosed to the public. So that was crazy. And then what's even more crazy is that practically every state in the U.S. has said absolutely no to sports, especially combat sports.
Right.
So he's going around trying to find secret locations, and he's talking about having an island to host the fights. Which for me, I'm stupid. If you tell me fighting on an island, I'm like stoked. I'm ready to see it.
That sounds awesome.
This is like a video game for
Yeah.
me, you know. But for you had your suspicions, huh?
Well, let me put it this way. Like, I think he is trying to secure an island. Like that, the rumor mill is still churning about this fight island, you know. And I think that's the genius of Dana White, is that like he could throw out some crazy ass shit, and like it's not your fault that you fell for it. He's pulled off so much ridiculous stuff in the past that like I just stopped learning. I learned to stop doubting him, right? But I did find it all suspect. I was like, why would an island? How does that circumvent like the laws? Unless it's like an international island or off the internet, you know, like it just didn't. I couldn't understand what the purpose of having an island is, other than getting like making a big splash like in the news.
But for me, I bought it because I've seen MMA promoters hosting fights on an island before. This back in the day, 2007.
Right.
Bulldog fight.
Costa Rica.
They
Puerto
hosted
Rico
fights
or
on
something.
the beach in Costa Rica. So for me, it wasn't far-fetched.
Yeah, sure.
But for you, you're just like looking at like everything logistically, like the medical
Yeah.
people and the crew setting up the.
Yeah,
thing.
just logistically, it seemed like more of a nightmare. So then it led me to believe that, and this might be me putting on my tinfoil conspiracy theory hat, but we know he's in cahoots with the president, you know,
Okay.
the big boss, Mr. Donald Trump, and I assume that there was some sort of like agreement that maybe like, hey, if what you guys don't know, type deal can't hurt you, so just play dumb. Like, we're gonna host it on an island, but in actuality, it's gonna be hosted on like an Indian reservation, which was actually came to fruition, where we later found out that they were planning on hosting it on an Indian tribal land, right, which is technically not owned by the state. But I figured that they would do something like that where they start talking about an island, and that way, like, for example, exactly what happened is like the state of California found out that it was being hosted in California. The governor goes to supposedly, from my understanding, Gavin Newsom went to the president of Disney and said, hey, this, like, we got to pull the plug on this. This can't happen, put pressure on the UFC. But I'm thinking that with the whole island thing, if no one knew up until like a day before that it was actually being hosted on tribal land in California, by that time it would have been too late. The show must go on.
So do you think, because we all know that Dana is Trump's guy.
Yeah.
They're really close. Trump hosted UFCs in the past at his casinos, and Dana White spoke for Trump at his rallies.
Trump showed up at Madison Square Garden for that fight, UFC, I forget which one it was.
I think it was the one between Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz for the BMF title.
That's right, yeah.
So do you think because they're so close that Dana White, when he talked to Trump, they had a gentleman's agreement type of deal, or
I think
did
so.
they mention it at all?
I probably, my thought is, like, honestly, like, the president probably has his hands full right now, so the last thing he cares about is what's going on with the UFC. But I'm sure, like, Dana White's tried to sell it to him. Like, I'm thinking that the conversation went, this is just me, pure speculation, but I'm guessing that Dana White reached out to him with the small talk about, whatever the UFC could do to help ease the American people. Like, this, just let us know. We'd love to throw, sports has been, for the major part of it has been canceled, but we'd love to still throw an event to keep the American spirit up. And Donald Trump probably would say something like, I don't know what state would ever sanction that, but by all means, if you guys can, throw an event, like, you have my blessing.
Yeah, because Trump wants the economy to come back.
He wants life to go back to normal, yeah, absolutely.
He wants us to look forward to something.
Right.
Which is interesting because in California, first you hear Dianne Feinstein, one of the senators in California, wrote a letter basically lambasting the event.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, that's getting a lot of heat from the senator. And then boom, next thing you know, Gavin Newsom calls the head of Disney, head of ESPN, who are the partners of the UFC, and basically tells them to pull the plug.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking Trump's like, fucking Gavin Newsom.
Oh, you think it's like a political play by? Are you?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. But that might be an interesting angle, though, to the whole thing. Like, this is like a, But honestly, I think if he said that it was going to be in California, even on tribal land, I knew that it wouldn't happen.
You knew.
I didn't know, but I was just like it's just going to make California look bad, okay. Especially if something like I don't know if you heard, but like Rose, like her family, like two of her members of her family had coronavirus, passed away. Like, if somehow that were to make it to the fight and someone were tested positive, that's like immediately that looks bad on every party involved, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge gamble right there, and people are going to be like, hey, we told you so. I knew that, whatever state he said yes to, other than maybe Florida. Florida seemed like they were the only state willing to. I don't know why they didn't host it in Florida.
So you say definitely the risk outweigh the reward in the situation?
I had a feeling that we weren't going to have a fight unless some trickery, some fuckery were to happen. Like, we were to have a fight island, and somehow the fight island's location wasn't ever disclosed, but it really occurred in like wherever, like the Las Vegas compound, and people just kind of turned out, like, the Las Vegas or the Nevada Athletic Commission were the wiser. UFC hires independent commission to sort of regulate the fight. I don't even know if that's possible, but like, the fight wasn't going to happen without some sort of fuckery is all I'm saying.
Yeah, it seems like there's so many moving parts that have to fit in such a fragile
Yeah.
and immediate way
Yeah.
that one bad thing happening, like
It's a house of cards.
getting testing positive for coronavirus, like a camera guy or something,
Yeah.
or one of the fighters. What if like one of the main event fighters tested positive for COVID? Then what do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a house of cards.
Yeah.
But
And initially I was like, Dana White, he's got to look like the most foolish person in the world right now. But then we're kind of talking about this, and like this is such a typical Dana White move. Is like you get the world talking about him, you know, and bam, he's the only relevant thing on. Like it was making ESPN a front page, you know, when they're talking about throwing this card because there's no other news out there. People were thirsty for any sort of.
He is such a genius of promotion and self-promotion too.
Yeah.
That was our next topic. How do you think Dana White comes out through all of this? For me, it's a fascinating story. I love like the theater of it all.
Yeah, me too.
Because you look at all the major sports, NFL, NBA, baseball, Major League Soccer. Everything's on hold.
Right.
And these sports industries make way more money than MMA, larger footprint,
Yeah.
but they're adhering by the rules. Dana White and the UFC are saying, F that,
Yeah.
we're going to make it happen, we're going to get you the fights that you want to see, and we're going to prove to you that this is going to be a huge payoff. And then it falls apart at the last minute, like
Right.
at the 11th hour. So as a person that's following this by the hour, by the minute, for me, on one hand, I'm like, safety first. It's not worth it. But on the other hand, I'm like, damn, this crazy SOB almost pulled it off.
Yeah, almost pulled it off. Yeah, got people talking. I think it's a win for the UFC. I think obviously, way bigger win if they were to actually host the event next week. Warranted nothing. No, there's no casualties or there's no cases of coronavirus, you know, or no other negative press surrounding the event. It would have been a huge win because everyone's thirsty for sports right now or any sort of content. Like I remember listening to this podcast where they were saying that like in the past couple of weeks, like there's been hundreds of thousands of dollars, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, being bet on random ping pong games that are occurring in Russia or in China. And mind you, like that's the level of thirst that people have to just wager on things that they couldn't even watch. So imagine like what people are going to do if there's something that's on television that you can bet on or that you can watch.
Man.
You know, like they would eat it up, gobble it up, right?
Yeah, you have non-MMA fans who've never even heard of the UFC, doesn't care.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they're tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it brings up another. This is like super sidetracked, but I was just thinking like sports is the only thing that it's really like it's like an amazing product when it's super live. But if it's even a day old, then you don't really want to watch because all these other networks are like giving out free content, you know, like left and right. But and people like some people I guess are watching like the 2013 MLB championship game 7 or whatever, but UFC is like the only company that hasn't done that. But the UFC has like this weird thing where like all those fights are still kind of relevant today. Like I would love to have free access to the UFC fight whatever they call it, like
the Fight Pass.
Yeah, Fight Pass, right? But they haven't released it because they know people are hungry for that content. Combat sports are kind of different than any other kind of sport. Like it still has a lot of relevance.
Yeah, I think fight sports are different than most other sports in the sense that the ability to watch it live is such an amazing moment, and it doesn't have the same replay value as NBA.
Oh, you're saying that it doesn't?
I don't think so.
Oh, I think it does. Okay, well, that's an interesting topic. We can go into another time. But I guess your main question, not to get too sidetracked, was is Dana White hero or villain? To me, he's always going to be a villain. But I think he's the greatest promoter of all time. Like at least as far as like in my lifetime, like he'll never be like what he's done for the sport, and how he's promoted it, and the angles, the risks that he's taken. I remember like and this just shows how long we've been kind of watching. Like, I remember when UFC was like largely illegal in most states, you know, and then he somehow made it acceptable. But before that, people were like, "This is never going to happen. This is not something that people wanted. There's no appetite for this sort of brutal like combat sport, you know." And then he made it a mainstream thing, and then he like even more recently, he made like. I forget how many millions of dollars from selling the UFC to like a large, like he made it, not only did he make it like give people like create like an appetite for mixed martial arts, but he also made it profitable, you know?
Yeah, he took it from the dark ages, got it regulated, got it accepted into all 50 states in America, made it global, partnered with Reebok to get that top tier branding, partnered with ESPN.
Oh, that was huge.
That was huge.
Yeah.
And a lot of fighters in the UFC have become household names through the structure that he and the Fertitta brothers built. Yeah. So for me, it's always like, I love Dana White from a promoter standpoint. I don't like a lot of the things he does in terms of fair treatment of fighters and fighter pay, but at the end of the day, he still delivers top product. He puts the fights together that the fans want to see. He puts the best of the best fighting each other in their prime, and he's almost pulled off this crazy stunt.
So to me, he'll always be a villain, but he plays that heel role like no one else, and like I respect that, and he does it like in an unconventional way too. And like I just remember like I forget, it was like some fight with Jon Jones or Silva way back in the day, and like it was like a shitty card, and he just went right after Silva, and it was like that was like the embarrassing promotion. I'm so embarrassed, and I apologize to the fans. Like I was like, no other commissioner or owner of any sport would ever do that, you know, but he does it his own way, you know.
I remember he said that to Anderson Silva after a couple of bad title defenses. He said that if Silva fights like that again, he's gonna strip him of his belt and make him fight on the undercard prelims. Like, how are you gonna say that to your middleweight champion?
But that's how you should handle that situation. Hey. Like, he just shows him like, hey, I have the power in this, you know.
And then the next fight, Silva moves up in weight at 205 and then fights Forrest Griffin and then knocks him out in the first round, walking backwards.
And then made the legacy of arguably, maybe he set the fire under Anderson Silva's ass, and he was like, hey.
That's true. I mean, like, I've never seen anything like that in my life. So, awesome. Dana White is the 0.1%, 0.001% of the people that makes the world go round. That's for sure. You know, another thing I want to discuss today's podcast, or Fightcast rather, is that I've noticed while everything's going on, UFC is trying to make the fight happen. Fighters are expressing that they want to fight and make money. You notice that the media, and specifically MMA media, have been rallying against putting the fight on due to the pandemic and health reasons. Some people are saying MMA media is showing their hands as anti-UFC, anti-MMA. What's your take on that?
Interesting. So, and I haven't heard this angle before, and I've been largely I haven't really been following any particular publication that's been saying that, but having you tell me that, like, I think, we're in an interesting time. Like, it's sort of like one of those things where it's like, it's almost like I don't even know what side is like the patriotic side, like where we're like, hey, you know, we're all patriots for staying at home and just being safe, and the message that we're trying to send out to everyone is like unity, you know. And I feel like anyone who is opposing that is sort of like, you know, you're either saying what I'm doing is more important, or the other side of the coin is like, I need to be that beacon of like light, you know, for the rest of the country. So I guess having said that, like I think the UFC feels like they are the latter, like they are this beacon of hope. And probably the MMA media, which is definitely on the other side of that coin from what you're saying. So they're saying that, you know, like you're not above any other sport, and I think it plays into Dana White's personality too. Is like sometimes you get the sense that he might think that he's above, you know, I don't know, like the rules and regulations. He doesn't have to abide by the same rules because he basically created this lane himself from scratch. So he's like, hey, I'm gonna do it my way. Screw you guys. And that probably is coming off as rubbing the general media the wrong way.
Yeah, but I disagree with that statement that says the MMA media is anti-MMA, anti-UFC, strictly because if the UFC doesn't go on, the events don't go on, these MMA reporters don't have anything to report.
Right.
So it's not like these guys are millionaires.
Yeah.
If these guys don't have anything to report, they're most likely to get furloughed or laid off. So them knowing that and still urging the fight not to go on actually shows me how much they really care about MMA, but beyond that, about humanity as a whole, so much so that they're willing to put their jobs on the line.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that. But I think, yeah, in general, we're a little bit short-sighted. Like, I think humans in general, they're probably not as concerned about, they don't, if you were to go to them with the, hey, the UFC will collapse and it won't be able to recover from this. Which side do you want, I'm sure most of them will say, hey, just throw the fights, So they're not as altruistic as you're making them out to be, I don't think. But I think, I think they're just I think a lot of people don't have, and I believe this about what's going on right now with our current state of coronavirus, but I think that we don't have enough information, so people are just speculating, and we don't have any good sources or reliable information that really we can latch onto right now. So they are kind of just mimicking what the general media is saying, and we don't really know yet, to be honest.
Yeah, that's the crazy part is even the smartest people on the planet aren't able to predict.
Yeah.
When this will end. But just pivoting a little bit away from UFC 249, that's been the majority of our podcast, and just so much craziness has happened with that event that it was worth breaking it down on those levels. There have been some other big MMA news that's happened outside of UFC 249.
Yeah.
Mainly Jon Jones, DWI.
Is it a DWI or DUI? What's the difference?
So I looked it up. DWI and DWI essentially are the same definition.
Yeah.
Just depending on the state, they'll either call it DWI or DUI.
Okay, got it.
And this is not his first time
in
trouble with the law when it comes to
He's
alcohol
a repeat
and driving.
Offender is what they would call him.
And first of all, did you watch the video?
I didn't realize that. No, I did not. I didn't know that there was a video out there. But I can only imagine that it's him hunched over his car seat, just slurring his words. He's always been my understanding is that the officer that pulled him over or that caught him was the same officer that's been pulling him over. So they sort of have a history together.
It's like a small town in New Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
this guy John.
But I remember I've seen other videos of him getting caught, and he's always been kind of polite, just a little bit off, he didn't seem as big of that guy would fuck anyone up, And as an intimidating guy as him, I never got the sense of oh, this guy might do anything at any moment. He just seems, which leads me to believe that this is just classic CTE really. And I hate that we're constantly without knowing we're diagnosing this guy with CTE, but I think this guy needs a pass because honestly
he gets punched in the head for a living.
Yeah. Come on. If anyone has CTE, that guy has CTE. He has all the classic symptoms. Plus, he's been fighting for the past 10, or I don't know, 10, probably more than 10 years. He's been wrestling. To some extent, he's been abusing his body and his brain for give the guy a break. But that leads to the other question. If we're going to use that as an excuse for him, should we allow him to continue fighting knowing that CTE has such heavy repercussions? We've seen countless and countless times of people just going off the deep end, and their brain will just rapidly go into there's a million different case studies right now about that, So if we're going to use that as an excuse, is it responsible for us to be hey, I want to pay $70, $80 to watch this guy's next fight, Do we owe any, is there a responsibility on us? Is there a consumer? Is there a responsibility on Dana White? On whoever's Jon Jones' friends that he's surrounding himself with?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on there, and I really feel for the guy. it's obvious that he has dealing with his own demons,
Yeah.
such as like most of us have our own
Yeah.
demons to deal with. For him, it just happens to be that he's the world champion UFC fighter.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot more scrutiny.
But it's complicated even more so because this is not like his first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Like this is like his, I don't know how many like chances he's gotten, or like just even like articles about him just like getting wasted at clubs, like just like he seems like a reckless type of person, you know?
Yeah, and what I fear is that his identity is so closely tied to him being a fighter.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any other outlets.
Yeah.
If you look at Daniel Cormier,
Yeah.
his one of his biggest rivals.
Yeah.
Daniel Cormier seems like a really well-rounded person. He's
absolutely,
an awesome
yeah.
dad, great coach. He has commentating duties. He
Yeah.
has wrestling coaching. He has so many different avenues
Right.
to create a living for himself and his family, so that once that fighting career is over, then he has
Something to fall back on.
different ways, avenues of revenue to continue to create his legacy.
Yeah.
Whereas you see people with Jon Jones, his personality in the media doesn't come across as genuine.
Yeah.
You don't see him having an identity outside of fighting.
Right.
What he's known for is being dominant in the ring and
Yeah.
also out of octagon issues.
Yeah.
And I fear that he's going to fall into that category with older fighters that have gone through an experience where their identity is taken from them after their fighting career is gone. Look at BJ Penn, for example.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In Hawaii, he's
Yeah.
getting beat up by fat drunks in the
Yeah.
street.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the crazy thing about what happened to Jon Jones though, is like so much crazy shit was happening in the world at the time.
Yeah.
That
Just got
another
rushed
Jon
into
Jones
the
DUI.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I remember my initial reaction was like, they just kind of like disgust, like, again, like, this guy can't even, for a guy that's as talented as, and this is like, honestly, like, to me, he is like the most dominant fighter. And I know he's had like close fights, but like, I just remember watching him like as his meteoric rise, like he was just physically, like you've never seen anything like that, where just like, it's not like he got lucky. It's not like he just like imposed his will on other fighters and just guys that are veterans in the game who are still in their prime, and just imposed his will on them and just made them look like there's levels to this, and Jon Jones's stratosphere is ahead, right?
But the crazy thing about that is that he was so dominant for the majority of his career, but you see like his last two or three fights now where I thought he lost his last fight.
I thought so too, yeah.
Against Reyes. And I felt like he lost his last fight before that against Thiago Santos. Very close fights.
Yeah.
Actually going either way. But as his physical peak, his prime is going down.
Yeah.
And his out of ring antics continue to be a problem.
Yeah.
What's gonna happen when finally he loses his first fight? How is he gonna deal with that loss in his personal life? You think?
Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's the medicine he needs. Like everyone always says, you got to hit rock bottom, and like clearly, like the guy hasn't hit rock bottom yet. Like I think he's made mention of hitting rock bottom numerous times in the past, and like he's always like found himself to get into trouble again. So that, like I said, like leads me to believe that there is something that's like his brain has been compromised from just being hit so many times, which is honestly like that's probably not that far-fetched to say. Like I'm sure a lot of fighters have CTE. Like I wouldn't be surprised, right? And
but it's funny though. It's just like us two guys commentating on like a 1% of the 1% physical specimen that lives, breathes, and eats fighting, killing, and then me like I have to wear the sweatshirt because I don't want to show my man boobs.
Yeah, but you know what? Like that's the beauty of like everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Not everyone should share their own opinion, but we're all entitled to it. And the real currency is like we'll let the people decide if they find this content valuable, they're gonna listen. If no one finds this useful, then like that's their currency, right? Their currency of attention. So
it's up to you folks. Agree or disagree? Like, comment,
Subscribe.
subscribe. But before we go, let's talk about the future of MMA. Because we always talk about how we see the world being different once we get past coronavirus, how businesses are gonna be operated differently, education, healthcare, all these sectors are gonna be affected, and when they bounce back, it's not gonna be the same as it was before.
Right.
How do you think the MMA landscape is gonna look? Because they're already talking about when they're starting up the UFC again. Dana White wants to do like a crazy amount of fights, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And it's gonna be at the Apex.
Yeah. I think it's difficult to give very like a tangible, like this is what's going to be different. This is what's going to be different. But what I've learned from this past month of just like seeing how the UFC moves, it's interesting to see that like there's all these different different sports that are going on, and we're in a time where like basketball's popularity is rising. Football is actually like, yeah, they get the most amount of views, but people are so afraid of like CTE that young kids are not playing. Like high school football is like rapidly declining in popularity, and you see sports like baseball that are almost like just year over year they're losing fans, you know. So I think that after this time, Dana White's really going to see that he's really not that far from pushing UFC into like the stratosphere of all the major three sports, you know, football, baseball, and basketball. Like I don't think they're that far away. A lot of the challenges about like how violent it is and CTE aren't applicable to MMA because you don't need the same infrastructure as you do with football, where there's like you have all these kids playing and there's Division One. Like UFC is a much smaller sport, you know. I think the way that they move going forward, if from Dana White just being like a businessman, is he's gonna look at, you know, he's already proven that because the UFC is so much smaller, so much more agile than these other sports leagues, that they could be the first to do things like this. And they could do things like throw a Fighter Island, you know. And there's a lot of advantages that his sport has over these other sports that are more like dinosaurs. They've been around for a long time. They have the audience. UFC moves way differently. And I think if he's smart and his people are smart and he's smart, I think they're going to find a way to, how can we really take advantage of us being so nimble, of us being the newest sport, of us willing to take the risks that other sports aren't willing to take, and how can we use that to leverage us so that we could, you know, climb up the rankings and be that sport for America or for even globally for the world. I think that's another thing that UFC has as their advantage, is that, you know, they may not be popular globally, but the fact that their fighters are literally from all over the world, it's easy to capture a global market or get a global presence, right? You just have that one Chinese fighter champion, you know. Recently, it was like the female fighter, Wei Li, you know, and you already piqued a little bit of interest right there. You know, it's so easy to plant that seed everywhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And fighting is such an easy sport to understand from a casual perspective.
Yeah.
That it's innate in us to understand there's punches, there's kicks, there's submissions.
Yeah. Somebody's getting their butt beat.
Yeah. And it's so easy to understand. It's so universal. And you're right. They're not boggled down by all these departments and leagues and like history and bureaucracy. They're really just being led by an insane president, Dana White, that, thank God he's the president of the UFC, because any other leader of that company, they wouldn't be where they are now.
Yeah.
And they won't be where they are like 5-10 years from now. So yeah, I'm excited for what's going to happen with the rest of 2020.
Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting, the first fight that they bring back. But yeah, so that pretty much is everything that we wanted to cover in today's Fightcast.
Yeah.
How do you think it went? First episode.
First episode in the books. I think it's we got the whole public access television vibe going, which I like. We'll continue to give content, so you know, as long as you guys are providing us feedback, you know.
Like I said, we're your go-to content for guys that have no inside information, and we'll release our takes days after the experts. So continue to come back and support, like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next week for another episode of McGarry's House Fightcast.